Pure carnivores, protein triggers insulin.
You've said this already. It was ridiculous the first several times you said it, and it's still f***ing ridiculous now, Rob. Get a grip. Write yourself a script, and then throw it in the bin and shut your bloody mouth. I haven't been disappointed that this video would be just as excremental as your last one. It really is, Rob. Absolutely f***ing appalling. It's clear that your PhD is of no value because you've got no grasp whatever on science. So go and be an allopathic physician. In private practice, shut the f*** up. Stop making videos. You ridiculous f***ing clown. Good morning, darlings. Thanks for joining me once again. Did you miss me? I certainly missed you. Rob Sivers. Wrong again on the interwebs, I suspect. First caveat, I have not watched this through. This will be off the cuff first time that either one of us has watched it, unless you've already watched it, in which case you've already watched it. That's probably why so many of you sent me an email saying, please respond to this, please respond to this. 50 billion emails I've had this morning, all saying, deal with this, deal with this. So I guess I better. Second caveat, if you're the sort of person who would rather just listen to Rob's video without interruptions from me, as often as I feel it's fit, even in the middle of a sentence if that's what I want to do, then you'd probably better just click off here and go and click over there and listen to Rob, in which case you won't learn anything except what Rob wants you to know. But we're here to deal with actual facts, actual reality, actual scientific rigor, the epistemology of human nutrition, so-called science, and I'll give it that one, etc. So let's do that. Yeah, all right. Let's crack on and hear what Rob has to say. His video is entitled "Why Humans Are Not Carnivores." So this isn't going to go well for you, Rob, because you see, we are. Absolutely, unequivocally, no question. Something like 5 million years of both positive and negative selection pressures have determined that, and your opinion that it's not so has no bearing, actually. But however, we will give you the opportunity to try and convince me/us. I do have an open mind to it. But what you will need to do is provide me with some very, very powerful inference that I've had it wrong for 20-something years. All right? So you've got the opportunity. Let's hear it.
Hi folks, Dr. Rob Sivers. I am the Carb Addiction Doc, and this is going to be my most hated video ever.
Right. So you're looking for clicks rather than actually educating people on what they really ought to be doing in terms of their nutritional approach. Is that what you're saying? For those of you that haven't seen it, see my response to Rob's video yesterday, where basically what he said to us was that he himself maintains a level of personal adiposity which is above ideal by choice in order to subserve having some blood parameters in a range that he wants them on the basis of a vast miscomprehension of the meaning of those parameters and a completely fallacious reason for having those parameters there. Dear oh dear, Rob, I hope this video is better than yesterday's, but I doubt it somehow.
I am wearing the animal hat because and I love this. I love the animal movie that's about to drop in June. Please get ready for it. Please watch it. It is fantastic. I myself am heavily carnivore based. So is my son. So is my wife. My whole family is carnivore based.
All right, but your film here is entitled "Why Humans Are Not Carnivores." So, Rob, which is it, my friend? Or probably my unfriend by now, if I wasn't already.
Carnivore based. We are not pure 100% carnivore.
Who said we are? Carnivore is any animal that eats the flesh of any other animal in any proportion. Hypercarnivore, which we absolutely are, Rob, is over 70% of our intake, as falsely, fallaciously determined by so-called units of heat energy, which is nonsense. That's for another day. That's hypercarnivore, 70% upwards. 100% carnivore, well, humans aren't that necessarily, but we're very, very close, actually, ideally. And the reasons for that, I think I've made very, very clear on my channel over the last 7 years that I've been doing these videos. But what do you know that I don't, Rob? I've got an open mind. Let's hear it.
So today's video is going to discuss why a pure carnivore diet long-term is an anti-human bad idea.
Okay, well, we're going to have a problem, Rob, again, because it isn't. There is no evidence extant anywhere that what you've just said is so. So whatever you bring up, well, it's going to be pretty easy to dismiss, I would imagine. Funnily enough, after sort of more than 2 decades in the field as a high-level academic, researching, producing peer-reviewed publications myself, consulting externally with major organizations in the multi-million-dollar range, I pretty much know what's in the literature. And I can tell you without fear of contradiction by anyone who's actually competent in science, the epistemology of science and its disciplines, that there is no really good evidence or inference even to support any such claim. But, as I said, let's hear it.
Okay. So let me back up a little bit.
Yeah, I think you should back right up. I think you should back the bus right up, Rob. And when you've finished backing the bus up, I think you should go down the back and sit on the back seat and stay there, frankly. All back of the bus. Because, well, your videos are excremental, Rob. I'm sorry. They are absolutely pustulous and excremental. They're kach. Okay?
Pure carnivore, going 100% high-fat carnivore is...
Hang on a minute. Now you're adding extra parameters in. Make your mind up. What is it that you're bagging or trying to bag? Is it 100% carnivore? Is it 99% carnivore? Is it 100% high-fat carnivore? What?
Is the most rapid, effective way to correct insulin resistance.
Insulin resistance is still a construct, Rob. It is still an idea, and it's still an idea that's fallaciously described by the allopathic medicinal community and associated academic underpinnings as described as some kind of pathology and some kind of thing to be avoided. It is no such thing still.
By far. So if you have weight to lose, if you have diabetes, if you have bad heart disease, if you're a type 1
as opposed to that good heart disease, Rob,
diabetic, pure carnivore is the ideal, fastest way to lose weight and correct type 2 diabetes.
Okay. Well, is that some kind of an indication of its goodness as an appropriate nutritional policy for humans ongoingly? Give me some evidence that it's not. I think that's what you're going to attempt to do here. Whether or not you get that done, Rob, is a different matter.
And to be able to manage type 1 diabetes at a very low insulin utilization, very effective, healthy way.
Well, that sounds terrible, Rob. We can't have that, can we?
However, human beings physiologically cannot sustain a pure carnivore diet long-term.
Absolute, utter cuck. Nonsense, Rob Sives. Wrong. Fallacious, it means wrong. There's me repeating myself. I can't help myself when I'm talking to Rob Sives because he's the king of self-repetition.
Without becoming insulin suppressed. And here,
insulin suppression, Rob, is another construct, another concept, which seems to have been coined by your good self. Actually, I haven't heard anybody else talking about this idea, personally. It doesn't mean that they're not. Maybe they are. Maybe you've had some collaborators. Maybe there's some sort of consensus around this concept. Nonetheless, this is not a concept that enjoys any empirical support. This is your concept, okay? And it's cuck, in my not very humble opinion.
Here's why. So in this video, I'm going to compare obligate carnivores, species that have evolved to be pure carnivores.
Okay, so what you're going to do is compare a bunch of different species within and between. Well, that's not going to prove a damned thing, Rob. For you see, that's what different species are. They are different animals that have had a different evolutionary pathway to this point, and their specific strategies for survival are different. Nonetheless, there are a bunch of different animals that absolutely are what we should and can consider obligate carnivores, and or facultative carnivores if you like, that are different. So what?
And compare them to human beings that have evolved toward carnivore but are still omnicarnivore. And I'll explain why.
Well, you'd better.
So,
and in so doing, you're going to have to ignore objective reality, Rob, which seems to be a thing that you're already quite adept at. So, oh dear, here we go.
Let's go through this.
Yes, let's go on.
In carnivores, as well as humans, insulin is the hormone that we have to use to get sugar into our bloodstream, and both carnivores...
Yes, but insulin has many roles in the body, Rob, and that's just one of them. It may be considered the main role of it, sure, but it has many other roles as well. So what is your point? Do go on.
And humans... omnicarnivores require...
No, just because you say humans are omnicarnivores, that doesn't make it so. That's just your opinion. See how you've provided absolutely no evidence for your opinion?
Higher sugar at a low level in our cells. And
yes, we do require sugar in a low level in our cells. That, Rob, is why gluconeogenesis exists in humans. That's why it's a thing. That's why you'll find that in any biochemistry textbook you care to look at. There is no disagreement about the existence of this series of means by which sugar can be created from non-sugar precursors. And it seems like pretty much it's tuned by, well, many, many millions and billions of years of evolution at least, to have optimized its ability to do exactly that according to requirements. Job's a good un. But somehow Rob Sivers knows better. Okay, let's hear it, Rob.
Certain cells that have to have sugar.
Yes, we know that. That's why gluconeogenesis is a thing, still.
So the issue is not the use of sugar. This is not a discussion about whether sugar is needed or not.
It is needed in a small amount, relatively, by a number of the tissues of our body, yes. That does not mean we need to consume any in our diet at all, because we can create it. Gluconeogenesis. Rob, what is next?
Both species produce sugar in the liver by gluconeogenesis.
There you go. So you do understand this, okay? So what is your problem?
If humans are 100% carnivore and carnivore animals are 100% carnivore, we produce sugar.
Yes. So your first point backs up our carnivore status.
We produce sugar through gluconeogenesis.
You just said that, Rob. Remember, not 2 seconds ago.
Both livers, under the influence of glucagon, are very effective at that.
Yes, correct.
In order to get the sugar into the majority of cells, you need insulin.
Yes. Among other things. For example, the cells need to be apt to accept that sugar because it is required in those cells at that time. Should it not be, because there's already sufficient oxidizable substrate in those cells of whatever form those cells require, or a mixture if those cells are able to use various forms, then the doors are locked from the inside, precisely in order to protect those cells from the glycation damage they would suffer otherwise. This isn't hard to understand. It really isn't, Rob.
You need insulin.
You just said that. We understand.
Okay? And
yes, it's okay for you to say we need insulin. It's correct. We understand. You do not need to repeat it. We are not stupid.
Both species are very good at producing.
Which both species? You haven't named 2 species. You've named one. Homo sapiens sapiens. For goodness sake.
Using insulin. Not an issue. But the question, the big difference comes from what triggers insulin release. And this is where the evolutionary adaptation of pure carnivores is beyond that of humans.
Okay, well, we'll test that out in a second when I've fixed up this jolly camera, which is self-focusing because it's decided to set its own parameters again, and I need to go and fix that. So bear with me. Right, there we go. Okie dokie, let's carry on. Off you go, Rob.
So,
please stop making that ridiculous clicky smacky mouth with your noise with your mouth. Goodness, it's so irritating. It gets my turds all wangled up.
In pure carnivores,
yes,
protein, amino acids in the intestine, because they're eating meat, they're 100% carnivore, they're eating.
So they don't eat any fat, do they? Not Rob. This is going from ridiculous to very ridiculous very, very quickly, isn't it? I think you'll find that the kind of 100% carnivores that you're referring to are eating fat as well. The primary precursor for gluconeogenesis, Rob, is glycerol, not amino acids. Okay, son? For goodness sake.
Meat and fat, protein stimulates 90+% of their insulin secretion.
So?
A little bit coming from glycerol and fatty acids.
No. And you're talking about insulin secretion when you were just talking, prior to that, about gluconeogenesis. Which topic would you like us to understand, Rob? And perhaps before you make your next video explaining these concepts to us, apparently, maybe you should get some understanding of these constructs yourself. Because it seems like maybe you don't. No surprise.
So certain amino acids from digested protein, especially arginine, leucine, lysine, and glutamine, four of the common amino acids, directly stimulate insulin release from the pancreas. That is an evolutionary adaptation by pure carnivore animals.
Yes, and humans can do that too, Rob. It's not looking good for you so far, is it? Goodness gracious.
Those are your wolves, your lions, your cats, your eagles, your alligators, your...
Hang on. An eagle can't possibly be a carnivore, Rob. See, for it lacks the sharp, pointy teeth required.
Snakes, all the pure...
Snakes have sharp, pointy teeth. Perhaps they can be carnivores.
Carnivore animals, whether they're reptilian, amphibian, or mammalian, or
you forgot fish and stuff.
Avian. They have evolved that amino acids from digested protein directly stimulates insulin release in a dose-appropriate way.
Right. And humans have also developed an appropriate dose response to the exact same thing to suit the exact dietary approach that humans have in fact adopted for at least the last 110,000 years, which is how far back the nitrogen isotope testing goes, Rob. The inference is pretty good that we have been doing that. However, for something like 5 million years, both as humans and as species not quite yet human, but very closely related to humans that eventually evolved into humans as we know them today. So you still have no point here.
In humans, protein meals cause a small rise in insulin.
Right. That's because humans gain the vast majority of their nutrition from fat and only need to consume sufficient protein to meet their protein turnover needs. We eat more fat and less protein than tigers. Tigers eat more protein and less fat than humans. Hagfish have a different strategy again, as do eagles and snakes. Okay? What is your point? It doesn't make us not carnivores. We still are. Because meat and fat are both from animal sources in the case of the strategies undertaken by all the animals that we have so far mentioned.
about 10 to 20% of our insulin production or insulin release is triggered directly by amino acids.
Yes, but so what?
But 70 to 80% of our insulin requirement is not met. Not met.
You've just said that.
By amino acids and fat. Whereas in the
So what? And who's to say what our insulin needs are, Rob? Where are you getting these ideas about what our insulin needs are? Who told you that? On the basis of what?
The carnivores, it is met completely. The insulin release is completely met.
The insulin release according to your views on how much is required? A carb addiction bloke justifying carbs. Gosh, I've never heard any of that going on before. Perhaps, Rob, next month you'll make a video about how and why you started the sugar diet and how that's going for you. For goodness sake, what is wrong with you? Other than arrogance and Dunning-Kruger. Sorry to make a personal comment about you, but that's what's coming out here. You need to stop making these videos, Rob. You're making yourself look a fool. It's not me that's doing that, it's you. You do that every time you open your mouth, frankly.
By
Stop with the smacky noise. Seriously.
amino acids. So, gluconeogenesis, the production of sugar from fat,
Oh, from fat. Good, you got that right. Mostly in humans, yes.
needs insulin regulation.
Yes, and that's why the body produces the exact amount of insulin that is required for that task, assuming that you don't have uncontrolled type 1 diabetes mellitus. Okay?
And carnivores, pure carnivores, their bodies constantly, continuously perform gluconeogenesis.
Well, who is 100% carnivore and who's not? According to whom, on the basis of what? And do we determine who's a carnivore by having sharp, pointy teeth or some other characteristic? It's no better what you're doing here than the sharp, pointy teeth argument, Rob. You're saying because there are differences in the insulin secretion and insulin action in humans versus other hyper or 100% carnivores, that's a reason for you to ridiculously nonsensically state that we're not that. If it is impossible for a human being to maintain a 100% carnivore diet in the long term, you'd better tell Rick Rodriguez about that, because he's unaware of it, and he's been doing it 40 years. How about Maggie the Rancher from Canada, Rob, who's been doing it, as far as I understand, for 67 or 68 years, Rob? All right? Pull your head in, for God's sake. Stop with this ridiculous nonsense. Seriously.
So in a carnivore, their glucagon, which is the hormone that controls gluconeogenesis, is always elevated, and they're always in a state of ketosis.
And those animals that have that dietary approach, perhaps humans are different in many ways from other animals. Every animal is different from other animals, Rob. That's why they're different animals. Goodness sake.
Around meal times, those carnivores will produce some sugar from amino acids from protein.
So will humans. Just a different amount. What is your point?
Enough to support their blood sugar.
Are you going to post a single piece of research that backs any of this ridiculous nonsense you're now gobbing off? Are you going to analyze anything that you're going to post at us with any degree of critical thought? Or are you just going to espouse your ridiculous opinion for the next 19 minutes or so in terms of the time left on this video? I'm starting to suspect it's the latter. Epistemology, Rob, is underpinned by empirical, interventional, properly disciplined, properly designed, properly powered, properly tenured, properly observed, experimental works. Not your rancid, pustulous, excremental, ignorant opinion. Perhaps you should go and join a club with Milton Mills. He's also an obese physician who likes to say we're not carnivores for ridiculous reasons. You'd get on famously with him. Seems like your IQ is about the same.
This gluconeogenesis process, so glucagon is high, and those amino acids then trigger insulin that causes the sugar and the amino acids to get into their cells. And
stop with the noise, seriously.
Insulin regulates glucagon. So the issue with carnivores, if they don't produce insulin, their glucagon is produced massive amounts of sugar, turn all that protein into energy. So they use...
No, not energy, Rob. Energy is a construct. Metabolism does not run on energy. Metabolism runs as a function of the physical interaction between different forms of mass, not pure energy. I understand that mass is a form of energy, a condensed form of that, but we don't interconvert between energy and matter. That's not how metabolism works, Rob, for goodness sake.
Insulin to regulate glucagon. And this relationship is critically important.
Yes, it is, and in humans as well. That's why we've evolved the strategies that works for humans based on our nutritional approach that we've taken for the last around about 5 million years still.
So that they don't overproduce sugar, but they produce enough sugar to survive on.
Right, good. So humans do that too. What's next?
So insulin regulates this process by preventing runaway gluconeogenesis.
You've just said that, Rob. And it works in humans too.
After a high-protein meal. And remember, carnivores mostly eat fairly lean protein.
Right. Those that eat that way, other carnivores, such as human beings, eat more fat and less protein. I wonder how that evolved. Might have had something to do with the fact that we started as scavengers.
Most game that carnivores eat is fairly lean.
That's right. So what was left when the humans came by?
In
Jesus.
Carnivores, pure carnivores, insulin levels are low but steady.
The same is true in humans who eat an appropriate diet.
Not fluctuating very much.
That's right. The human insulin only fluctuates wildly when those humans consume a diet that's totally inappropriate for their speciation, i.e. one containing any significant amount whatsoever of exogenous carbohydrates, Rob.
Preventing the body from making too much glucose while ensuring tissues get what they need.
I said this yesterday in my critique of your last video, Rob, and I'll say it again. For goodness sake, write yourself a script before you start speaking. It's clear you need one. Your thought pattern is all over the shop. You're apparently unable to stay on concept, stay on track. The constant, mindless, vacuous repetition while you desperately search your brain for whatever the hell it is you're going to say next, it does not reflect well. All right? Sort it out, for goodness sake. Actually, preferably, what you really need to do, Rob, is shut down your channel and stop speaking publicly about nutrition. This is not your area of expertise, clearly. Neither is physiology or comparative physiology, clearly. Your area of expertise, it seems, is allopathic medicinal intervention as you've been trained to view that, apparently, and whatever the hell it is your PhD was in specifically, because a PhD is a very focused, very scope-limited piece of work. This is not something you know about. This is not something you should be talking about. You need to stop today.
Switching off glucagon and making sure that the sugar is getting into the cells, into the muscle cells. And as we said, in carnivores, glucagon is usually high.
In some carnivores, yes. In other carnivores, not so much so, because of the different strategies adopted by different carnivores, who are still nonetheless carnivore.
Alongside with a moderate and average insulin level.
Moderate and average, meaning what? On the basis of what? According to whom, Rob?
Glucagon helps to maintain blood sugar by promoting gluconeogenesis and fat burning. So your insulin level can't be too high because it blocks the use of fat or release of fat from the fat cells.
Correct.
So it needs to be adequate to control glucagon, but not high enough to block fat mobilization.
Correct. And that is why the human metabolic system is fine-tuned to achieve exactly that if you feed it appropriately. Still.
And the balance between low insulin and high glucagon lets carnivores stay in a fat-burning, ketogenic-like state most of the time.
Some carnivores, yes. Others, not so much.
One of the things that I'm...
Stop with the ridiculous, aggravating, smacky noise with your mouth, Rob. Seriously.
Currently doing is working in a gym format for exercise. But what I'm doing...
Oh, now you're an exercise physiologist as well, are you? No, you're not, Rob. I am, among other things. And I would bet you any price you like that your advice to people on exercise is fallacious, contraindicated, erroneous, and probably dangerous. Anything you like. Go on, though.
Doing is rapid, high rep, low weight sets with very, very short resting intervals. I'm also doing some 400 and 100 sprints based on heart rate.
Well, that's ridiculous. It's commonly done, even by some exercise physiologists, those who don't actually have a grip. Doesn't make it right.
And so how does this work?
Go on. Tell us all about exercise physiology now as well. Go on.
What you do is you do a set, let's say it's curls or bench press, light weights. You do...
No. Wrong. Light weights is a bad idea.
20, 30, 40 reps.
No, bad idea.
And you take your heart rate at the end of that. And your heart rate above 100, then you wait for your heart rate to come down to 100, and then you do the next rep. Same thing with a sprint.
Yeah, that's a bad idea, Rob. I knew you'd get this wrong. You didn't disappoint me. Well done, son. You got it completely wrong on how exercise should be applied by a human being to achieve the goals that you're talking about. Good stuff.
You go as fast as you can. For me, I do just outpace a snail, but you run that 400 meters as fast as you
Stop with that noise. Seriously. Stop it.
can.
The best way for you to stop with that noise that you're making with your mouth, Rob, is to shut it permanently. You are done on the interwebs. You are absolutely not a competent commentator on the issues that you have, for some reason, designated yourself to be an expert in. It's absolutely clear and patent that your advice is contraindicated, wrong, fallacious, I love that word, and ridiculous. What is next?
Takes me a few minutes.
That's hilarious.
And you watch your heart rate.
See me laughing on the inside?
And as soon as it's down to 100, you hit the next
You said that already, Rob.
curve. And
it was wrong the first time.
one of the things I've looked at is,
Oh, God, here we go. Let's chill out for the exogenous ketones that you do not need and actually will be contraindicated and counterproductive to your metabolic goals, it seems, if you actually understand physiology at all, which Rob Tholomew clearly does not. If you want to buy something that's going to be doing your body good by way of some kind of intervention, I would suggest the new nutraceutical products put forward by the fine folks at the Cerule Company. Stem Enhance Ultra, Cyactive and Plasma Flow are the ones that I stand behind and put my name behind. They're the ones you should get in a wellness pack on Subscribe and Save. That will upregulate your body's ability to release its own CD34 plus adult stem cells, which renew and repair your tissues with new cells with full-length telomeres. Isn't that awesome? Cyactive is an anti-inflammatory which knocks down inflammation, both the LOX and COX pathways. That's great. And Plasma Flow will clear your microvasculature of fibrin deposits so that stem cells and such can get to where they need to go. Right, that's what you ought to do, and you can get that at the link on the screen. In the meantime, let's hear all about how you should take exogenous ketones. You shouldn't, by the way. Absolute nonsense.
ketone IQ improve my recovery rate.
Well, that's a bad idea. because that will attenuate the training response, Rob. For goodness sake.
And not only have I used Ketone IQ episodically on some of these sprint days or fast run days and some of my rapid rep weight days, Ketone IQ has also sponsored a study. And the key findings, you'll see the study in the show notes.
But we won't, because we won't be looking at the show notes of your video, Rob, or reading the study. Because we already understand what ketones are, why they are produced endogenously by the body, when they are needed at the exact level that they are needed, and that adding more of those into your body perhaps isn't such a great idea for a number of reasons. Those of us that understand physiology and the physiology of exercise, as well as a few other important little factors like cardiovascular pathophysiology, science in general, statistical inference, etc.
The key findings are that Ketone IQ improves blood flow.
No, that's a cause and effect statement. It's not supported by the study that's posted. The study purports to be a controlled study. It's a little bit controlled. A little bit controlled does not establish cause nor effect. Sorry about that.
Higher muscle oxygenation and increases EPO for better endurance and stamina, but it shortens recovery time by between 10 and 20%.
All of those things are potentially not a good thing for a number of reasons that a competent exercise physiologist and general physiologist, such as myself, can and has already explained in some detail on my channel over the years. Folks should sign off Rob's channel and subscribe to mine and binge watch it. You'll actually learn something of correctness, veracity, and utility on my channel. You will not learn that from Rob Tholomew.
Of the time it takes for your heart rate to come down.
I hope you're all picking up I am not a fan of Rob Tholomew in terms of the things he is saying. He may well be a very nice gentleman in his personal life. I'm sure he is. But he does clearly have a very serious ego problem and Dunning-Kruger dripping from every pore. He does not know what he's talking about in the areas that he has self-determined himself to be an expert. And it's dangerous, contraindicated, and irresponsible. He needs to stop doing it today.
So I use Ketone IQ on these sprint days, and it makes a difference.
Well, it makes a difference. It's contraindicated, Rob. Good on you.
Certainly it does to me. Try it for yourself.
No, I won't be doing that because I understand physiology.
Very important. That's pure carnivore animals.
Yes, and humans absolutely are obligate hyper-carnivores, and indeed we can and do thrive on 100% carnivore, Rob. Still.
So, strict carnivores or pure carnivores do trigger insulin.
Some, and others have different strategies. Still.
From meat because they've evolutionarily adapted to use amino acids to...
Those that eat more protein and less fat. Yes, Rob. However, still, humans that have evolved along the lines of more fat and less meat have a different strategy. Fuck me. What a shock.
To create and release insulin.
Yeah, and humans have a strategy around that too, which works really well, so long as we don't pour a large amount of contraindicated, unnecessary, exogenous carbohydrates down our stupid necks. Tends to make us fat, Rob, and causes brain fog, apparently, and an inability to say things once, it seems, as well as, perhaps, arrogance and Dunning-Kruger. That seems to be another association with those that tend to support the pouring of carbohydrates. This is a guy who claims to be a carb addiction interventionist who's now telling us we should pour an amount of carbohydrates down our necks. Goodness gracious. I mean, am I the only one that finds that logic very, very difficult to grasp? I'm so limited.
Now, humans, while we've evolved, we've become facultative carnivores called omnivores.
So, no, we're not omnivores. Well, there's several ways of looking at this. You can refer to an animal's nutritional status by its behavior. in which case you'd say humans are omnivorous, because that's the way most humans behave. That doesn't mean that's what we are biologically designed to be. We've fooled ourselves by thinking we're more intelligent than nature itself. And we've done all this stuff that purports to be science, which it isn't, which purports to support an idea that we should consume an amount of carbohydrates, which we still shouldn't. Biologically, anthropologically, genetically, organ systems-wise, we are absolutely at least obligate hypercarnivores. And indeed, as I've said, the anecdotes point very clearly to what happens when people go 100% carnivore, and that is they thrive vastly more than they even do at 95% carnivore. It's quite stunning. We see this time and time again. But anyway, we still are waiting for any kind of inference from you, Rob, that would convince us remotely that what you have to say is worth hearing at all.
So we depend largely on a carnivore diet for nutrients.
That's correct. That's what determines that we are, in fact, carnivores, the very thing that the title of your video suggests we are not. Despite the fact that we have been hypercarnivores and are now obligate hypercarnivores for about 5 million years. What have I missed? Help me understand, Rob. It's because I'm so limited.
But we cannot depend long-term on an absolute carnivore diet.
Well, you've said that already, remember, and it was wrong the first time, and it's still wrong now. Yes, we can. Absolutely we can. There is unequivocally no evidence to support the claim you've just made. There are several anecdotes of people over multiple decades doing exactly that, and millions of others doing almost that. So you're wrong. Demonstrably wrong, absolutely wrong. We're done, Rob. Your little theory about your construct, your idea called insulin suppression, is just noise. It's just nonsense. It's cuck. It's rubbish. It's contraindicated, dangerous disinformation, and you need to f***ing stop. Still.
We are not obligate carnivores.
Yes, fucking are. Feed someone a vegan diet and see what happens, sunshine. I'll tell you what happens. 84% of those folks quit within 5 years, and 90% of those folks cite catastrophic health failure of some kind as their reason for so doing. All right, we're done. Carnivore, by the way, once again, because I know you need things repeated, Rob, any animal that consumes any amount of animal products. Okay, we are hypercarnivores, obligate for long-term health, and we seem to be optimized at 100%. Still, provided we do that correctly as per our evolutionary background, which does not include fruit or honey, because that's not animal products. Neither does it contain any amount of liver to speak of, and especially it doesn't contain freeze-dried concentrated liver. No, it doesn't. It is a diet based on the muscle, meat, and associated fat of ruminant animals to a level around about 80% upwards. 20% coming from other animal sources. That is what is ideal. Nothing else. Still.
Like wolves and lions and dolphins.
Do you see how wolves and lions and dolphins are all very different carnivores with different strategies? Different body shapes, different structures, different organ systems, different metabolic pathways in terms of what the prevailing pathways are. No, you don't see that? Okay, well, that's what your problem is, Rob. You need to go away and re-educate. Well, not re-educate. Educate yourself in the first instance. Here's something my ma used to say to me, and still does, and my grandma used to say to me. Unfortunately, she's now unable to say it anymore. Here it is. Son, you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. That is the proportion in which they ought to be used. Okay? I hope that's helpful for you in some way in your life going forward, Rob.
that have exclusively lived on meat for millions of years.
Like humans have, you mean? Meat and fat, that is.
Because our endocrine system,
Yes, go on.
the system that regulates hormones, requires GLP-1 triggering.
That's why it exists in humans to the exact level that it's required based on our nutritional strategy, Rob. Still.
By carbohydrates.
No, not by carbohydrates. No. Goodness gracious. Well, your inference is by eating carbohydrates, by consuming carbohydrates. That's wrong. We still have gluconeogenesis, Rob. Still. All right?
To release insulin. And GLP-1 also is a major player in regulating glucagon.
Correct. And it does so appropriately according to the design by natural selection pressures, both positive and negative, in human beings, according to the nutritional strategy, the niche in which we have evolved. Still.
Pure carnivores, protein triggers insulin.
You've said this already. It was ridiculous the first several times you said it, and it's still f***ing ridiculous now, Rob. Get a grip. Write yourself a script, and then throw it in the bin and shut your bloody mouth. Permanently. In terms of your public protestations of what you believe about humans and their nutritional strategies and their physiology. Because it's f***ing ridiculous.
Insulin modifies glucagon. In humans,
the same things occur to the right levels. Still.
That happens a little bit. But
yes, and that's the amount which is required.
The majority, 70 to 80% of our insulin release is in response to sugar, in response to carbohydrates.
That's because it's fallacious, and that's why humans, Rob, at large, who do that, have vastly elevated insulin above that which is actually required by our speciation. And that, Rob, is why many of us are fat and stupid and arrogant and brain-fogged and diabetic and have heart disease, among other. Well, it's one of the reasons for heart disease, but it's not the main one still. Wow.
The trigger GLP-1 that switches on insulin and switches off glucagon.
What happens when you have too much insulin chronically, Rob? Because that's what happens when you pour carbohydrates down your neck. Several things. An upregulation of a very clear and very recently identified, very elucidated, very well pathway. So insulin is directly inflammatory. And secondly, it reduces our ability to filter sodium out at the kidneys, raising our blood pressure. That leads to turbulent blood flow. That's the cause of your heart disease. The primary major cause. That's the one to intervene. And not with pharmacological drugs, Rob. The intervention required? Well, there are 5 interventions, 5 health hacks that you need to know, which are covered on a video on my channel called 5 Health Hacks That You Need to Know, whereon I'm doing that on the thumbnail, so that you can see that there are indeed 5, and so that you can also see the palm of my hand, which therefore designates me as a trustworthy individual. I am trustworthy, I'm safe and effective, I'm the science, don't question the science. Safe and effective I am.
So while pure carnivores have...
which humans still are.
High glucagon and fluctuating insulin levels like this, they're always about the same.
Some of them, yeah, and others not, Rob, still.
Humans require this.
No, they don't require that at all. That's your theory. That's your ridiculous, arrogant, postulous, excremental, fallacious opinion.
We require much more seesawing.
Much more than some animals, yes, but the way you're designating that with the vacuous hand waving is a total misrepresentation of the objective reality in which we find ourselves, Rob.
We need insulin to get the sugar into our cells.
Yes. Absolutely. We need it in a very small amount, Rob, because the design for humans is to have a very small amount of glucose in the blood, Rob, because mostly our nutrition comes from fat, Rob. Still.
To switch off glucagon, but we need low insulin levels and high glucagon when we are on ketosis between meals because we are living on fat. And the glucagon is producing a little bit of sugar from gluconeogenesis.
Yes, what is your point? All of that was correct standalone in that sentence without putting any empirical value on any of those things, numbers, or telling us what those levels ought to be in your mind for some reason. I haven't been disappointed that this video would be just as excremental as your last one. It really is, Rob. Absolutely f***ing appalling.
So obligate...
Stop with the ridiculous, aggravating f***ing noise.
Carnivores do not require carbohydrate-derived GLP-1 spikes for insulin release.
Neither do humans, because we don't require a lot of insulin.
Beta cells are directly sensitive to amino acids and fatty acids without needing GLP-1 as a major intermediary.
Some carnivores, indeed. Humans, different story.
In humans, without carbohydrates long-term.
Well, we don't exist without carbohydrates long-term, Rob, because of gluconeogenesis. Still.
Without carbohydrates long-term.
Oh my God, you just f***ing said that.
So your long-term sustainable carnivores, GLP-1 signaling decreases because they're not...
It decreases to the level absolutely indicated by our genetics, our anthropological past, our behavioral past, and everything about the niche in which we have in fact evolved, Rob. Still.
Not triggering it with carbohydrates. And not only...
We are not supposed to trigger it with carbohydrates exogenously. It is supposed to be triggered to the exact level that it is triggered by the glucose provided to us endogenously. Still.
Does GLP-1 signaling go down, the number of upper intestine GLP-1 cells goes down. So we lose...
So homeostasis is a thing? Well, f*** me.
You suddenly eat a carbohydrate load...
Which you should not do, under any circumstances, in fact.
You're going to see a massive spike in insulin.
None of these comments apply to an uncontrolled type 1 diabetic still.
Not going to clear that insulin. It's called a Kraft pattern 5 because GLP-1 is just not being produced and therefore...
It is still being produced. For goodness sake.
Insulin's not being reduced. So the beta cells become less responsive without the carb-triggering GLP-1 reinforcement. And we call that, or I call that...
there we go. See, you're going to make some shit up now to suit your theology. Let's hear it.
Physiologic insulin suppression.
Right, well, it's fucking nonsense. Absolute garbage, Rob. Nothing to recommend your ridiculous theory whatsoever. Shows no appreciation of human physiology, genetics, organ systems, biological pathways, anthropological gift, genetic gift, or anything. It's just a stupid opinion put forward by, frankly, a very limited individual.
Insulin.
Tell us all about how we should buy exogenous ketones, though, for God's sake. Seriously.
Suppression. You've heard me talk about that a lot.
We have, and we heard you repeat yourself again and again and again about it. It's still garbage.
So humans require GLP-1s from small amounts of dietary carbohydrate.
No, they fucking don't. Not at all, Rob. False.
To be able to clear the sugar that gets produced by gluconeogenesis.
Rubbish. It takes care of itself without any exogenous carbohydrate intake whatsoever still.
From the animal products we're eating. Think
rubbish.
That one through.
I have. Over multiple decades. It's rubbish.
We have a high GLP-1 dependence and we have...
Well, high dependence, what does that mean? Does that mean we need a lot of it? No, it does not. We need it in small amounts. The exact amounts produced according to the genetic instructions when we follow our genetic gift and feed ourselves appropriately, Rob. Still.
We have not adapted completely to a no carbohydrate diet.
Rubbish.
We need a low carbohydrate diet with a lot of protein and fat, predominantly fat.
There you go. So you do understand that, at least.
Our adaptation to a no carbohydrate diet is only partial.
According to whom, on the basis of what? According to Rob Tholomew, on the basis of his theology. Not according to any aspect of demonstrated empirical scientific endeavour. The very epistemology by which we determine what we know about these things. Let's all have wild theories about things. Why not?
And if it's complete, we downregulate both insulin and GLP-1 over time, and our blood sugar starts to rise, causing...
There are a number of reasons why the blood sugar rises, Rob, on carnivores. None of them are to do with your postulous theory.
Inflammation in the blood vessels, causing plaque formation.
Okay, have you measured inflammation in anybody's blood vessels, Rob? No, you f***ing haven't.
In the heart.
Okay, you also are saying that the only cause of heart disease is inflammation, which it f***ing isn't. Still, you do not understand cardiovascular pathophysiology either. That's not your field of expertise either. It's one of mine, by the way. Exercise physiology, human nutrition, cardiovascular pathophysiology, statistical inference, pure and applied statistics, doing research, all of that.
The paradox is that with insulin suppression on the
thing that you made up, yeah,
pure carnivore human diet, it's not very different in terms of cardiovascular inflammation than the people on a standard American diet who are insulin suppressed.
So, an insulin suppression is still a concept put forward by yourself, Rob. And it's still cuck.
So our evolutionary adaptation is to require a carnivore-dominant diet or a carnivore-based diet.
It isn't, Rob. That's your theory. That's your belief structure. That is your opinion. It's rubbish.
But a mix of some form of carbohydrate.
Wrong.
Be that the sugar in milk. That's why there's sugar in milk, folks.
Yes, and human beings are not actually designed at all by positive or negative selection pressures to consume any amount of milk post-weaning at all, let alone the milk of another species. Nonetheless, it's a perfectly acceptable nutritional thing to do. If you individually feel like you do well on any amount of milk and it doesn't seem to be a problem for you, then fill your boots. I don't care. I do it myself. I consume quite a bit of goat's milk in the form of kefir, so the sugar is actually reduced, and or in the form of cheese made by the lovely Pim. Again, sugar reduced in that case. Goodness gracious me.
That's why there's sugar in milk.
You just fucking said that.
To trigger that insulin.
No. Are you, let's say bovine milk, are you a baby cow, Rob? Or a baby goat? Or even a baby human? No, you're not. You're a weaned adult person. Now you're pointing at this as if this is the natural design. It isn't. This is something humans decided to do. Fallaciously, mostly. Because about 60% of people who try to consume dairy find themselves reacting negatively to it in an immune sense way. I wonder why that is, Rob.
And in fact,
if you say in fact, it makes it correct. Whatever you're going to say next, does it?
Carnivore animals, their milk has a much lower level of glucose and glycogen.
So, some animals, sure. Once again, do all carnivore animals have the exact same physiology and the exact same strategies to everything? Of course they don't, because then the competition would be too high, wouldn't it? Buffoon.
Think that one through, folks.
I have. I think I've just been quite clear about how your logic is so vastly flawed it's laughable. I hope people are rolling around the floor laughing by now. Well, there would be if it wasn't so damaging and dangerous, this ridiculous nonsense that spews forth from your excremental mouth.
Much higher protein. And
you just fucking said that.
Fat ratio. Carnivore milk.
Yes, humans are carnivores too. We have slightly different milk to other animals. Gosh, what a shock.
You go out there and you milk your friendly lion. And you
go on then. Have a go. The hell's that got to do with anything, buffoon?
Find there's very little sugar in there.
Yes, that's right. Correct. So what?
Interesting.
Yeah, What's interesting, Rob, what's stunning, in fact, is that you remotely believe yourself to be a competent commentator on any of this. It's absolutely f***ing laughable. Humcuckadillies. Frankly.
Isn't it?
No, it isn't.
So in carnivores, their glucagon is high.
Yeah, just saying in carnivores this and in humans something different is just vacuous. We're still carnivores. We're a different carnivore to some other carnivores. All carnivores that have evolved have different strategies, Rob. Still, what is your point other than there's no point to this ridiculous nonsense?
Higher at baseline than it is in humans. Insulin receptor sensitivity is
something rather is higher in some carnivores than it is in humans, ergo we're not humans. We're not carnivores. Nonsense. Ridiculous.
Different. And it's more tuned to respond to smaller and steadier releases of sugar from the liver rather than boluses of sugar from the intestine. In pure carnivores, ketone metabolism is upregulated and permanent. Humans should cycle through ketosis, but not always be in ketosis.
That's because humans have a slightly different metabolic approach to other carnivores. Still.
And the GLP-1s and the GIP hormones, the incretin hormones, are far more important in humans than they are in animals, in carnivore animals.
Well, we are a carnivore animal. We're a different one to the other carnivore animals. And you're making sweeping statements about all carnivore animals, ignoring completely that all carnivore animals have differences, some more different than others. Depends on how disparate on the evolutionary tree we are. Still.
So this is just so important.
What's really important, Rob, is for you to stop. Seriously, stop. You're making an absolute ass of yourself. Ridiculous nonsense from start to finish. Absolutely no remotely acceptable logical progression to what you're saying. Your logic is so flawed it's laughable. Anyone with more than 3 brain cells within a second of hearing this ridiculous nonsense coming out of your gob can dismiss it as garbage. Credible, by which I mean completely lacking in any credibility.
Yes, certain amino acids like arginine, leucine, glutamine can also stimulate insulin in humans, only about 20%.
You've just said that a bit back. Again with the repetition. We got that. So
it's very modest.
That's in line with the nutritional strategy and the biological strategy of humans thriving in our niche. Still.
And it requires GLP-1 and GIP.
Which there's no argument. It does in small amounts, and that's why we get small amounts of it.
And that, folks, while I am carnivore-based for nutrition, I have a low amount of carbohydrate that I do consume for exactly that purpose.
What you told us in your video that I responded to yesterday, Rob, was that in fact you choose to keep yourself at a level of adiposity, which is clearly suboptimal, in order to subserve this ridiculous notion that you have, a notion which is completely unfounded in any aspect of science whatever. You are a fool, an absolute imbecile, it seems. Sorry to get personal again, but this has to fucking stop, Rob. There are people out there who do not have the sophistication to see through your fucking nonsense. you are doing harm. Ergo, you are in breach of the Hippocratic Oath. Rob, you ought to be struck off the medical register. You also ought to return your PhD qualification, because it's absolutely clear that in your PhD education, you failed utterly to gain the slightest appreciation of science and its epistemology at all. It's quite an indictment on the training program, so-called, that you went through. And it's a very clear indictment on yourself, sir. What is next?
Because in humans, beta cells are tuned primarily to glucose sensing. The GLUT2 transporter, which has a low affinity, high capacity glucose transporter role, occurs in the beta cells.
Yes.
Not so true in the pure carnivores.
We are a pure carnivore still. The fact that our physiology is different to other carnivores does not make us not one. Still.
Without glucose,
Stop with that noise. I'm serious. This is beyond a joke now. Stop it.
our beta cells become quiescent.
And?
They don't release insulin adequately.
And? Who's to say what's adequate? What's adequate in terms of insulin release is pretty much determined by the intake of carbohydrates above the level of carbohydrates set by the homeostatic mechanism via the endogenous production of glucose, i.e. gluconeogenesis, Rob. Still.
So humans have a reliance not only on GLP-1, but also on GLUT2.
Yes, and GLUT2 is a protein which is transcribed under the instructions of the genes. So what's your point?
Receptors in beta cells to sense that blood sugar.
Yes, that's right.
Carnivores don't have that. They don't.
Some carnivores don't. Have you noticed that all sorts of different animals either do or don't produce all sorts of various proteins? For example, humans don't produce the protein that's involved in synthesizing our own vitamin C. There's a reason for that. That gene is knocked out in humans. There's a reason for that. It's called negative selection pressure. There was a reason for it. Does that make us not a carnivore too? No.
Have the GLUT2 signaling.
God, this is painful.
And a long-term zero carbohydrate diet in humans downregulates both GLUT4, GLUT2 expression, GLUT4 in the muscles, GLUT2 in our beta cells, and GLP-1.
Goodness, it's almost as if we don't need so much of those things under those conditions because that's the genetic optimization, it's homeostasis. We're not going to waste effort in producing a bunch of proteins that we do not fucking need. Good.
Which makes us insulin suppressed.
No, that's still your concept that you made up. What you're talking about is the normal physiological function of a human being according to our genetic design. Not a pathology of any kind, and nothing that you need to intervene on by pouring carbohydrates down your neck, which is only going to make you more likely, Rob, to be a fatty. Which, by the way, will have a direct effect on your blood pressure, almost certainly, at some point. Which is one of the primary factors, which is a physical determinant of the likelihood for you to develop atherosclerotic lesioning at some point, Rob. Okay?
And hyperglycemic. And
no, hyperglycemic according to whom, on the basis of what? That's taken care of by our homeostatic mechanism too, so long as we don't intervene and throw spanners in the works.
Then that high level of blood sugar has the same body effects in our lean mass hyperresponder patients.
No, it doesn't. You just said effect. That's the conjugate of cause. Cause and effect. Show me a paper that establishes this cause and effect relationship. Shall we wait?
As it does in the standard American diet patients, explaining the rise in soft plaque in the studies.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't explain anything. And the study that you're referring to is the Keto CTA study, which I covered in great detail in my video responding to you yesterday in terms of its absolute uselessness, its complete lack of utility, its complete lack of any application of science in any way, shape or form. It's just nonsense still.
When humans eat a small amount of carbohydrates, our insulin is high and our glucagon is low.
Is that a good thing? And if so, why so? Show me a study that supports that claim.
That is not true in our pure carnivore animals.
We are a pure carnivore animal still, Rob, whether you like that or whether you don't. We still are.
Where their baseline glucagon is always high.
No, not all carnivores. For example, Homo sapiens sapiens, where we have a different approach still. What's your point?
If we humans only eat protein.
We don't only eat protein. We eat protein and associated fat, Rob. Goodness sake.
We get a small insulin trigger.
That's right, and that's the exact size of insulin trigger that we need. That's what's ideal for us.
A major glucagon trigger. And
well, again, it's almost like we have genes that control all this kind of stuff.
That is inadequate to clear our blood sugar.
Wrong. It's only inadequate to get the blood sugar below a level that you believe it ought to be, Rob, on the basis of your complete lack of understanding of the physiological process, the design of humans, according to our natural selection history, and what is in fact optimal for a human being, which is a level of blood glucose which is remarkably stable and set by our homeostatic mechanisms, and that is not interfered with by the pouring of any amount of exogenous carbohydrates to speak of, other than what we find inherently in the meat, down our ridiculous fucking necks.
So, in survival mode, humans can, for a period of time, shift into a low insulin, high glucagon state for months or years.
Or indeed, 67 fucking years. In at least one case. All right. I think we're done, Rob. Seriously, I'm glad you're almost finished in terms of this video. You are certainly, absolutely, definitely finished in terms of your credibility. You are a buffoon in this field. In terms of the nutritional needs for a human being, dick about you need to stop. Seriously, I'm not joking about this. This is not for clicks. This is not just to be controversial. You are absolutely incompetent and you need to shut the up.
And that is how we correct insulin resistance.
Insulin resistance is still a construct and it does not need correcting. It is the result of our bodies doing exactly what they are designed to do when we consume a diet that is inappropriate for our speciation, i.e. one containing any amount of carbohydrate to speak of still.
With a carnivore diet, but it's a backup, not a primary system.
That's your opinion, and it's false. It's ridiculous, it's fallacious, it's nonsensical, it's excremental, and it's ignorant in the extreme.
Whereas carnivores have evolved this as their default operating system.
Some have, yes. Some other carnivores, like humans, have a different approach still.
Humans have not yet. And in fact, if anything in the modern era, we're sliding evolutionary backwards rather than forward.
Well, some of us are, Rob. Clearly.
So now let's look at, and you'll see some diagrams here that explain this.
Oh, good, some diagrams. That'll help.
And I'll leave these notes in the show notes. Now let's look at the opposite side. Ha-ha!
Ha-ha!
Let's look at hummingbirds and other high carbohydrate animals. How do they avoid diabetes?
What the pissing has that got to do with human beings? Absolutely fucking nothing. Jesus H. Christ on a bicycle.
How do fruit-eating bats, who have a very high metabolic rate, and hummingbirds, who consume about 90% of their calories.
They don't consume any calories at all. Nobody consumes calories. No animals consume calories. Calories are units of heat energy. By definition, by measurement, that's what they are. They are nothing else. They cannot be brought to rest in any inertial frame of reference. They are photons. Basic physics, Rob. Basic first principles. calories. Shut up, Brian.
As pure sugar, hummingbirds, bats, nectar-eating mammals, and some fruit-eating birds live on extremely high carbohydrate diets.
Right, so different animals have different strategies. Fantastic. Still.
Sometimes over 90% of pure sugar.
Yes? And those animals? Whatever. Brian, for goodness sake. Brian has opinions too.
Yet they don't develop diabetes.
I wonder why. Maybe that's because they're evolved to get their nutrition according to that strategy. We are not.
Humans rapidly develop diabetes or obesity when our carbohydrate consumption goes over 80% of our caloric consumption.
There we go. Number one, no, not calories still. Not calories at all. False. And number two, Robert's just said it's impossible to get diabetes mellitus if you consume 79% of your intakes in the form of so-called calories from sugar. No, Rob. Absolute cuck. Nonsense.
So that's a system.
Stop with that noise. Stop with all the noises coming out of your mouth, in fact. All of them.
Failure, as opposed to a system non-triggering on the carnivore diet for humans.
Oh, God. This is painful, isn't it, kids?
So why don't these obligate sugar eaters develop diabetes?
Because that's their fucking design. God's sake.
Well, firstly, they have a massively enhanced glucose clearance. Hummingbirds have the highest blood glucose levels recorded amongst vertebrates.
That's awesome. I'm happy for the hummingbirds. I'm glad that they follow their evolutionarily appropriate diet and don't think themselves more intelligent than that and start making up pseudoscience to explain to them why they should be carnivores, which is only going to lead to them being dead very quickly. I'm so glad.
Sometimes their blood sugars have been recorded to be over 500 milligrams per deciliter.
Fucking what?
Now, normal humans should be below 95.
Yeah, but we're not hummingbirds, are we? And again, says whom on the basis of what, Rob?
These guys are over 500
Yes, you just fucking said that.
Milligrams per deciliter after feeding. That would put any human being into diabetic ketoacidosis.
Great. Awesome. So don't do that. You sugar diet folks. Are you listening? And it won't necessarily do that at all, in fact, Rob.
And would make them diabetic over time. But in hummingbirds,
it would make them dead even quicker.
Their muscle cells immediately take up the glucose without needing much insulin.
Wow. It's almost as if hummingbirds and humans are quite different animals. F*** me, really?
That again is an evolutionary adaptation.
So you do understand. A bit, maybe. Why can't you put logic together, Rob? F*** is wrong with you?
So their muscles can, just like the human liver, can take up tons of sugar with a very, very low requirement for insulin.
Tons, you say? No.
Their muscles are hyperpermeable to glucose, particularly on demand during activity when they're flying.
Well, I wonder why. Maybe that's because of the incredibly high power of muscle contractions required by such an animal. Okay, good. When was the last time you saw a human flap his arms and start flying without help of an aeroplane or something?
Burn glucose directly.
No, they don't burn glucose. It's oxidized. Sure, I understand burning is oxidizing, but burning denotes uncontrolled oxidation, uncoupled oxidation.
For ATP while it's still entering the bloodstream. So the glucose is just getting into the bloodstream. It's already being turned into ATP.
No, it isn't being turned into ATP. The glucose is being turned into carbon dioxide and water. For fuck's sake.
A near immediate oxidation of glucose.
Right. To carbon dioxide plus water, not to ATP.
Whereas humans, the process is much, much slower.
Well, almost as if our requirement for power output in our muscle systems is much different and much less than that of a hummingbird. F*** me, really?
From the liver to the bloodstream, under the influence of insulin, into the cells, into the mitochondria, and then we produce some energy. So because
no, not energy still. Energy is still a construct. The substance required to produce metabolic work is ATP, which is produced from ADP plus PI in a coupled series of reactions involving the oxidation of oxidizable substrates, carbon skeletons. Wow.
Our skeletal in humans, our skeletal muscle, glucose...
ATP is not energy. It's physical matter, which sure is a form of energy still, but it's a specific type of matter. It's a specific molecule. It is that shape molecule that is required to do the work. It's nothing to do with energy per se. Goodness gracious, this isn't hard to understand.
Uptake is heavily dependent on insulin-dependent GLUT4 receptors.
We know. So what?
So after eating carbohydrates, we need both the liver and the bloodstream to clear that sugar using insulin.
That's right. So what?
Hummingbirds have a very...
Oh my God. God, give me strength.
Very high insulin-independent glucose transporter system.
Yes, we know.
Similar to, but not quite the same as our GLUT1, GLUT3 receptors.
Yes, we know.
That occur in our liver. Flight muscle contraction itself in these bats, birds, and hummingbirds stimulate non-insulin glucose uptake.
Yes, we know.
Similar to how human muscles take up glucose during exercise via AMPK pathways.
Yes, so what?
We'll talk about that at another time.
Oh, please make another video, Rob. We can't wait.
So what differentiates...
Stop with that smacky noise.
Hummingbirds is they naturally have a very high tolerance without harm, without vascular inflammation.
Right, because that's their design, and it's not ours. All you're doing is supporting what I'm saying, which is we should not be pouring carbohydrates down our stupid fucking necks, Rob. How can you not see that?
To very high baseline glucose levels, whereas in us, in humans, that would cause vascular inflammation. The protein membranes, mitochondria, and proteins in the hummingbird system have a built-in resistance to glycation, or the attachment of sugar.
Okay, and we don't because we have a different strategy, not involving the intake of significant amounts of glucose. Great. Are we getting somewhere?
So their hemoglobin A1C, for example, doesn't go high.
Wow, what a shock.
And they do not have an oxidative stress.
Right. Because they're a different animal still.
Related to sugar turnover and sugar levels. They don't suffer from the advanced glycation end products.
Right, because they're a different animal still.
That cause human diabetic complications.
Right, because they're not humans, and we are.
Whereas in humans...
Stop with that noise.
We do.
That's right, because we shouldn't be eating sugar. Great. Any one of you that's watching my video that's subscribed to Rob Sideways, what's wrong with you? Stop it. Unsub from Rob Sideways. The only way we're going to shut him up, it seems, because his arrogance and ego is way out of control. The only way we're going to shut him up is to unsubscribe en masse to this imbecile. Anyone that thinks anything coming out of this man's gob is worth hearing, seriously, you need your head read. What is wrong with you? Sorry to be so direct, but this is the only course of action that's open to us here.
So evolutionarily, hummingbirds have selected for tolerance to hyperglycemia without cell injury.
Great, so what?
Now, here's something else. Hummingbirds burn sugar at a rate that is 10 to 15 times faster than mammals of their own size.
Okay, because of the requirements of that animal on the basis of their behavior. So f***ing what?
So they burn through sugar like it's on fire.
No, not like it's on fire. Just 10 times faster than other mammals of their same size. See how that's different?
Within minutes after a meal, most sugar is either oxidized or stored as glycogen or fat. So they disappear that sugar very quickly.
Right, because of them being the animal that they are and the lifestyles that those animals have.
And there's minimal idle time of that sugar in the bloodstream.
Right, because they're a different animal from us. Still so hot.
So the flux is very fast.
Yes, good, so hot.
Human flux is slow.
Yes, good, so hot.
If we ate pure sugar,
which we should not do, okay? Those of you that are doing that ridiculous diet fad right now, absolutely you should not do that for any period of time. Bad idea, still.
And sat still.
Or even not.
As humans, our glucose spikes, insulin surges will cause damage.
Yes, that's why you shouldn't do it.
But the hummingbirds eat, burn, and store that sugar.
Oh my God, you're just talking in circles, Rob. We got it the first f***ing time. And the response is, so f***ing what? We are not a f***ing hummingbird. Wow.
Very, very rapidly. So,
stop it!
After feeding, hummingbirds use carbohydrates because their muscles are busy. When they sleep, when they go through an overnight fast, they switch to fat oxidation very fast. So they do store fat and they burn fat. Their mitochondria are ultra adaptable at shifting from glucose to fat metabolism.
So what?
We call that the Randall cycle. Human beings.
No, we don't call that the Randall. That's got nothing to do with the Randall cycle. God's sake, you don't even know what the Randall cycle is, clearly.
These are much slower. We do not have the same metabolic flexibility to switch from sugar to fat as hummingbirds do.
It's almost as if our strategy that we've evolved on is one of those fuel sources and not the other. We
are metabolically relatively inflexible.
Right, compared to a hummingbird. So what?
Which is one of the roots of insulin resistance.
No, insulin resistance is still a construct, still an idea, and still not a pathology of any kind.
Isn't that cool?
What's really cool, Rob, is the fact that any old imbecile can come online and make ridiculous excremental postulous disinformation videos. Carte blanche, that's cool. I love that.
So we've talked about pure carnivores not requiring an ancillary trigger of insulin.
Yeah, some. Others do. We are a... Oh, my God. I'm running out of patience.
Their food directly does that. Humans don't. We need GLP-1 as an intermediary.
And that's why we have it in the exact amount that we need it when we are following a species-appropriate, species-specific diet still.
Hummingbirds who are sugar obligates...
Oh, for f***'s sake.
Don't need insulin or need very little insulin. We humans still need a lot of insulin.
Right, so humans and hummingbirds are a different animal. Great. Humans are also a different animal to the animals that you're referring to as 100% carnivores, inferring and indeed directly stating that we're not, which we still are, biologically. The exact number of citations to publications of any kind that would prove your point or even make any kind of inference around your point is 0 in your entire video. What you've done is give us your ridiculous fucking opinion for nearly 24 minutes. And you've shown us your absolute destitution of capacity to even form basic logical structures that make any sense at all. It's absolutely fucking disgraceful, Rob. It is seriously time for you to withdraw completely. Go and be an allopathic physician. That's what your training is. It's clear that your PhD is of no value because you've got no grasp whatever on science. So go and be an allopathic physician in private practice. Shut the up. Stop making videos. You ridiculous f***ing clown. Is that clear? I hope it is.
It is amazing how evolution has adapted our biology.
Yeah, it is. Amazing. Over billions of years. It's done a great job of it in some cases.
But if we defy our own physiology and our own biology...
By making up some shit saying that it is what it isn't, you mean, for example? Like saying we should eat bunches of carbohydrates at all, because we shouldn't, still.
It will cause harm.
That's right. Your disinformation will cause harm, Rob Sives. That's why you need to stop. You are absolutely kicking the shit out of the Hippocratic Oath every time you open your ridiculous fucking mouth. Stop it.
So, folks, I am carnivore-based.
Well, that's your decision. And look at the results of it, shall we? Let's all have a good look and see whether or not following your strategy, Rob, is likely to lead us to where we want to be. Shall we? Okay, let's move on.
On purpose.
Yeah.
And if you're in any doubt about this, ask Paul Saladino.
Well, I wouldn't ask Paul Salad I don't know about anything except psychiatry or allopathic medicinal intervention, because those are his areas of training, despite the fact that he has no experience applying either of those fields of training because he hasn't practiced not a single day in his life. So basically what that means is I wouldn't ask Paul Saladino about anything. He knows exactly dick about f***. He's another arrogant, ignorant imbecile. No wonder you're citing him as someone to ask about anything. Birds of a feather and all that? Hummingbirds, perhaps. Tell us about hummingbirds, though, Rob, because you haven't mentioned that yet.
I am the carb addiction doc. I know this has slapped you upside the head.
No, I think you're the one that's been slapped upside the head, pal. You really, really have been given an absolute pounding verbally by my good self in the last 48 hours. I really hope you have the self-awareness to shut your rancid, ignorant gob and sit through both critiques in full and fucking learn something. And I'll tell you what it is I want you to learn. You, Rob Sives, are incompetent to speak publicly in this field, and you need to stop immediately. How's that? Is that clear? That's the distillation of everything I've been saying in the last 2 days about you. I hope I don't have to spend too much more time correcting your pustulous garbage. I am not happy with you, Rob. I hope that's been clear.
This is not my belief.
Yes, it is. That's exactly what it is, in fact. I've made that more than patent, I think.
This is not my opinion.
You just fucking said that. Yes, it is.
This is fact.
No, it fucking isn't. That's a piece of paper you're waving in front of us that we can't fucking read even to see what's even written on it. For God's sake.
Go to ChatGPT.
Oh, well, ChatGPT says so. It must be right. Wow. Fuck me. Fuck me sideways. Are you done yet? If you weren't done with Rob yet, are you done now? Rob's source of information is Paul Salad I don't know and fucking ChatGPT. Oh my God.
Ask those questions and you will see the...
Or come and ask someone like myself who actually knows what he's fucking talking about. I'm available. Here's the link. You can consult with me. I'm very reasonable price-wise. Unlike Paul Salad I don't know, who will lead you up the garden path and charge you $1,000 an hour or part thereof, I won't do that. I'll charge you much, much less for the benefit of my significant knowledge. And I won't even be as rough with you as I have been on Sives here, because you'll be a paying client. This is a bit of edutainment, frankly. But nonetheless, everything I've said is fundamentally absolutely correct. Prove me wrong on any of it. That's a challenge for you. Anyone who thinks they can prove me wrong on any aspect of this kind of stuff, come and debate me, face to face, on camera. See how it goes for you. I've spent more than 2 decades putting these arguments together, and characters much smarter than you, whoever you might be, have tried. God, they've tried to prove me wrong, and they've failed every single time. Even the ones that can bench press 415 pounds and don't have a high school diploma even, perhaps, let alone a number of advanced research degrees. Okay?
The answers factually displayed.
No, they're not. ChatGPT will not give you facts. It will give you what it's programmed to give you. Paul Salad, I don't know, will not give you facts. He'll give you his ignorant, arrogant, Dunning-Kruger dripping opinion. You're finished, Rob. You're done. Seriously. Have the good grace to withdraw. Shut the up permanently.
You can have your own opinions. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions.
Well, opinions are just like arseholes, aren't they, Rob? And that almost everybody's got one, and it's almost certainly full of shit at any given time.
But there's only one set of facts, folks.
That's right, and you haven't given us any of them. You've given us your opinion. See my previous comment about opinions.
And that's what I've just presented.
No, you f***ing haven't. Absolute garbage.
Facts.
No, you f***ing haven't. Garbage.
I am the carb addiction doc.
You said that, remember?
I can help you to manage this.
No, you f***ing can't. Again, is that the kind of management we want? I don't.
To be insulin sensitive.
We don't want to be insulin sensitive because that's a construct. That's an idea. What we want is our physiology to be optimized. And Rob Sivers has no fucking idea how to do that because he thinks you need to pour carbohydrates down your neck to achieve it. And he's wrong. That is a fact. Sorry about that, with the facts and all.
Give me a shout.
Don't do that, boys and girls. Unsubscribe from Rob Sivers immediately. Stop being quite so non-discriminatory in terms of who you listen to, and come and listen to someone who knows what they're talking about. If you don't like me, that's fine. I would suggest there are a number of other characters that you could listen to who would be vastly superior to anything you will get from Rob Sivers. Dr. Anthony Chaffee would be my first go-to. Dr. Abs, highly trustworthy, knows what he's talking about. To a lesser degree, Drs. Berry and Baker. Absolutely. Dr. Sarah Pugh. Again, to some degree. They all have different styles. None of them that I'm aware of are quite so abrasive and shouty and sweary as I am. However, if you want the best possible source of information, I genuinely believe that it's here on this channel. So, stick around. I also make videos in different styles as well. Sometimes I do dripping with sarcasm because that's quite fun too. Sometimes I just do straight-laced, no act at all, just the facts. But you guys don't watch those. Probably my own fault. But there you go. Join me next time when someone will be wrong on the interwebs, because it really doesn't look like slowing down anytime soon, does it? No. Ciao then.